All right. First off, I want to welcome you all to the first ever CIMFest, and hopefully first of many. To give you a brief overview of how CIMFest came to be and what it was in the midst of the Middle South chapter coming to be and the student chapter of Columbus State University. We had an idea. We need another conference because all we have is Siege in Atlanta, run by our very own Andrew Greenberg. And so when it came down to this, we were like, yeah, we want this. How are we going to do this? You know, it's running and making a conference and doing it. You can ask any of the people that took part in this. You're nothing without your team. My team is what made this happen. It's been a great journey working with them all, and can't leave out the sponsors either. I mean, Chick-fil-A, GameStop, High Res, Tripwire, just to name a few. We all came together to make this happen for you guys. It's something we've all been planning for. One of the first stages was, who was our keynote going to be? If you would have told me 2 years ago that Jesse was going to be here, I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. If Andrew, I'm also the Middle South chapter president. I've known Andrew Greenberg for 3 years, something like 3 sieges, we could say, 3 years. And when I first met him, it was just like, hey, my name's Andrew. I'm Rod. I'm so and so's son. That's how the introduction went. And it was at the college fair because Siege runs a college fair. And if you would have told me 3 years ago we were going to start a chapter here, I was like, who's doing it? I would have just been like, yeah, what's going on? But it's been a pleasure starting the chapter, the Middle South chapter down here. CSU has the first ever student chapter right now. Going to take some time to introduce some of the officers. I know one of them is not here right now, but I'll acknowledge him. We have grown since we started in March with our first meeting on March the 20th. Yeah, don't even remember the day, but it's on our timeline. We have grown with more officers as we've needed. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. Start with the CSU student chapter. Daniel Rockwell, stand. He's your student chapter president. Yeah. Okay. He's the student chapter president. Dominique Tillman is upstairs. He's the vice president. So if you see him, congratulate him. Nicole Coulter is the secretary for the student chapter. Peyton Hinton is the treasurer. Yeah, he's hiding. Now, to introduce my officers, I've got 3 very special ones. They came in different ways. First one I appointed was around our first success event was Cage. Was run by the student chapter and is where all the students presented their games in the Davidson Center. That day I appointed Tyler Stout. He is my videographer, photographer for the Middle South chapter. When you get a chance, thank him because he set all this up for us along with Matt Franklin, who's out there monitoring a few things. He set up the one in 205 with Jesse. And next thing is, in the back is my graphic artist, Ashton Johnson. Anything media related, she's handled. Last but not least, our newest officer, Matt Bowen, our gaming liaison. He's in charge of getting rules for any gaming tournament we got. And his first thing in 2 weeks is the Super Smash Brothers tournament. So CIMFest is finally here. I don't know about you guys, but I could not sleep last night. It was. Yeah, that's you guys. That's the 3 of you. Yeah, what is sleep? What my brother says, what is sleep? Sleep's for the weak, right? So, in CIMFest, the title came, this is a funny story. Andrew and I were talking through Facebook, and the name just come up like, we're having a hard time thinking of a name. We wanted something with a 1, something with Columbus in it. Andrew said, CIMFest, Columbus Interactive Media Fest. I said, I like that. Let's go with it. Then he tells me, I was kidding. I'm like, so I ran by the officers and everybody. We had it, we took it, we went running with it. Speakers came naturally once we said Jesse was a speaker, everyone just came into play. Some talks you'll see today are talks on security, history, some very unique talk that's going to be done that's never been done. Voice acting, which has never been done at Siege either. We have all these unique things coming together. I'm just looking forward to seeing the day go by. Lunch, there'll be a lot of demos for you guys to use and everything. We have Chick-fil-A coming in with sandwiches and such. Biggest thing, raffle. I know you all saw that standee out there. That Overwatch standee and a bunch of posters. $1 per ticket. You can enter as many times as you want. We'll start selling that during the lunch period. See Peyton for that. And we'll raffle things at the end of the conference. Without further ado, before Jesse comes and takes the stage and does his keynote opening for all of us, Andrew Greenberg is going to come up and say a few things, introduce Jesse. So, without further ado, Executive Director of the GGDA.
All right, I'm going to make a few very important announcements right off the bat. First, do download the CIMFest app. I believe it's both iOS and Android. So go, if you haven't already done it, go into the stores. It's free. I tried to get them to charge $20 for it, but they wouldn't do it. So CIMFest, CIMFEST. After you've done that, tweet out to hashtag CIMFest2016 how awesome it is. And then the most important thing you'll do all day, turn off your ringer, please. I would appreciate it. And especially for what you're about to see now. We've got a sound guy coming up, so no ringers going off while the sound guy is speaking. So really appreciate seeing folks out here today. Rodrigo is absolutely correct that nothing like this happens without a good team in place. And that's also true of the games you're going to make. Even the friends I have who say, I'm the solo game developer in my basement, have a team of contractors who work with them. So right around you today, if you don't already know the people sitting around you, you probably should, because that is very likely the team of your next game. So if there are people in this room you haven't already met, definitely take the time to do so. Find out what their skill sets are, find out if there's someone you could work with, and down the line, work with them on a new game. There's going to be a game jam in Atlanta in Kennesaw State University the final weekend of August. If you want to do a quick road trip up and spend a weekend not sleeping, but developing games, who can think of anything better to do over a weekend? Definitely do so. The GGDA has been around since 2005. Siege since 2006. We're entering our 10th year this year. This will be the 10th anniversary of Siege. You can come up to Atlanta October 7th and 9th. We'd love to have you there. Lots of good speakers, lots of good presentations, lots of good opportunities to network and form new teams. And it is through Siege that I did indeed make Jesse James Allen, who came up. We were as excited as Rodrigo was to have him here as to have him at Siege. We've got tracks at Siege on all the different areas of game development design, programming, the business side, art, serious games, and a great audio track. And Jesse was one of the people who really made it stand out as one of the 5 best tracks on game audio in the world. There are very few places other than GDC that can really say they have a better audio track than Siege. And it's because of speakers like him. And he has been incredibly freely giving of his time and his expertise. We brought him up to Atlanta outside of Siege. He just blows people away. Detailed discussions. It's great to have someone like Jesse who fully understands the audio side and has such a strong understanding of programming, art, and the design part of games all mixed together. Makes for a fascinating individual. And most of us really have our one areas of expertise. That's great to have, but to have one person who can bring them all together like that is amazing. And then to share that knowledge in new, and I frankly can't wait to see the way he's going to demo what he's talking about today. It's great to make games. It's great to speak about games, but it's great, even better to make games to talk about how to make games. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse to show exactly how he did it.
I gotta meet this Jesse guy. Sounds like he's good. I gotta get my act together. All right, give me a second here, guys, to get all my little craziness, all my alchemy running, as they say. All right, got a little POV cam here for later on. Okay, I'll let that run. All right. Hear me okay back there? Everybody cool? All right, so what this is about is actually entering I guess a corporate or a studio environment to make video games. As far as how I got into video games, I actually posted a fairly detailed article on the CIMFest Facebook. That was kind of my story, how I made the jump from post-production over to the video game world, which was completely alien to me back in, I guess that was 2002. I started on the PS2 console. I also started with EA, which everybody thinks is this huge Colossus company. We were less than 180 people back then. So it was the Wild West. It was a bit of the Garden of Eden, you know. We were kind of like exploring a lot of stuff. And that's kind of what this is about. This is kind of exploring what you might discover if you enter a company that's growing like that. And also a little bit of the unexpected turns and twists that might occur with it. So this is really about living in the environment of making games more so than making games. Also, for you guys interested in making a game, this is my first attempt at doing everything myself, like animation and all the whole 9 yards. This took me a month. So let's play. All right. So this is a little guy. His name is Jake Anderson, and he's going up here. He meets his recruiter there. Recruiter's interested in bringing him aboard a small studio. The minute this conversation happens, it's like an orgasm for your soul. It's you're gonna lose your mind, and it's just really one of the most amazing moments, especially at a company that you really admire, or you're excited to, you've played their games, you've been a fan of their games for a long time, as I was. And it just kind of gives you this completely different sense of self. So first time you show up, often these studios are in buildings with other companies. It's always funny when you go to your first like game company job. You kind of expect this like magic palace, Willy Wonka chocolate factory thing. Nah, it just looks like any other building, So once you get in here a little bit, trying to figure out where you're going. There's a sense of confidence that you have when you first start your job of kind of like, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be able to, do all these great things with the games and do everything that you've always complained about in other games that you've played. So when you meet the staff and everything, it's kind of like you're a little bit in the alien world there. All right, so then you start to, you can kind of wander around here. I even had some of the other characters here. Kind of talk to everybody here. Let's see. All right. He's excited to get rolling here, so he gets to his little desk for the first time. Whoa, hold on a second. So what this says here is this is where the magic happens, and this short 27-step process will get you going with all the tools you need to get started. This is that moment of you just jumped off a cliff. And a lot of it, if you are not familiar with it, is programs you've never heard of before. And the reason that is because there's so many proprietary systems to keep things running that a lot of stuff has to be created internally. There's no training available for it. Usually it's kind of like as you go. A lot of these tools are in development as you use them. So there are some stability issues sometimes. It totally is the Wild West. This is where the peers that you work with are going to be your best friends and pretty much your saviors as you go on. All right, so as you dig into it, you're going to have a lot of problems. I used to call this the 600% learning curve. You will be sweating and feeling like I am an absolute idiot at my job and always asking people questions and everything like that. And this is the common thing, like your peers will be like, oh my God, like they'll help you out with it. And the problem is when you work in a company, it's just always everything's going all the time. So you have a lot of what they call assumed knowledge of the tools and whatnot. Of course, everybody's had that problem. How do you not know how to not do that? But it does take you back after you've been there for a while of like, oh, right, I remember the time that I first ran into this. So you just have to be patient with it. Moving on along, the hours do get very long once you are starting to get into the critical parts of game projects. And you'll be sweating it a little bit, just like, oh my gosh, how can I survive this? A lot of the people that have been through it, they just know, you have your peaks and valleys with this kind of stuff. So, and he's excited about the food that they bring in, All right, cool. Everything's better with tacos, right? 7 months. It's funny, it gets relative when you think about bugs that you encounter as a consumer and you're like, how did they not fix that? But when, you're staring at bug boxes and there's like 8,000 bugs in your game, you're just like, this is impossible. So when you start seeing, hundreds, like 200-300, you're like, we're doing all right. So, and then of course QA is, they're your friends and enemies. It's like, you'll be like, yes, we conquered all that, and QA, like, yeah, you didn't address all these. And you'll get sick of whatever you're eating. Absolutely, by the time alpha is going through here. And then, it's that moment, right? And this is really a cool thing. Aside from seeing your game on the shelf for the very first time, the first time that game plays through and it's like a thing, it's amazing. And the first time you see your name in the credits, you're just like, yes, it's really, it is that summit of the mountain moment, really. Yeah, and your peers, of course, will definitely be the people that help you make that happen. And then you sleep for like 3 months. So when you come back the next year, you kind of know what to expect. You have that sense of, I know a little bit more. You don't feel like such a noob. And you've also learned a lot from the errors that you've made, and you're just kind of like, okay, I think I know what not to do. All right. This is also kind of an interesting thing. I put this in here because when you work in a company, it's strange that you really never get to see the consumers or really hear much of the consumers' reaction to your games. But you do read the reviews. And if critics hate your game, you'll feel like we're an utter failure, nobody likes this game or whatever. And for me, like, as we read various reviews, and not all of them are bad, you're usually somewhere in the middle somewhere, you just get self-conscious about your work because it's like, they always say, always have a kind of a hard shell to you, but you take it personal. You put a lot of hours into that. You spend up a lot of nights, and so when critics kind of blast things that you do, you're just like, how can I make this better? How can I make people happy? And you kind of like put the voice of everybody through the critic, and that's not necessarily true because some critics they don't even like the genre that you're working on or whatnot. So take that all with a grain of salt. And it's better to just listen to fans and whatnot, just to kind of hear what they think would be the better improvements. So, and that's basically what your comrade here says. So when you first get going again on the next year, it's literally like, okay, how do I avoid every error that I made last year? And then if you're working in stuff like perforce version controls or whatnot, to make sure you separate your last year's project from the new year's project. Basically how to go. And a lot of syncing. All right. So by the time you roll around into your third year, you have really kind of conquered all of the gremlins and both your workflow and you're feeling more confident about what you're able to do professionally. So here you're meeting with your boss again. He says, basically you got to go to a design meeting because this is your moment to pitch some of your ideas. You're out of the training mode. Your training wheels have come off, and now you're able to make some suggestions on how to improve the game for real. And okay. All right. So we're off to the meeting. this is always an exciting moment to be able to kind of talk to the people who are the head of each discipline and say, this is what I'd like to do. So you're talking with your development director there. So you kind of like, in this particular case, Jake's talking about they want to make load screen interesting, so it's not a still frame. It has a little load bar there that bores people to death. It's something more interactive. Hint, hint. Every company in the world. All right, so this is just kind of like trying to. His suggestion is just to make everything a game, make it interesting. And here he's talking about the punching sounds in the game are not as realistic as they should be. So he says they should order a huge slab of meat. What would they do with that? Well, this might be something from my past. I'm not totally sure. All right, there you go. And again, a lot of it is just, your enthusiasm will really sell those kinds of ideas. So here's kind of an interesting thing that happens is that your average attrition rate at a studio is usually 3 to 4 years. And then all of a sudden you'll see people that you started with, they either can't deal with it, like, I can't, this isn't what I want to do. They move on to bigger things, or they just take different directions within the company. A lot of them move into management or other higher tech positions. So you do lose that little band of brothers quite quickly, and that's why you really got to embrace it when you have it, and those people will change for you. And then in this case, also their studio has expanded a little bit. And in this particular situation, his boss has left and started a Queen tribute band. And he's making some jokes. All right, he's sad. And then occasionally this happens that your leaders have left you or have moved on, and you have to figure out what you're going to do about it. And you can do two things usually. You can either say we need help and bring in somebody else, or you can kind of, as I say, man up and try to take charge yourself and work with your team and try to make things happen. Because remember, the game industry is still a young industry. I know it's hard to believe now. I mean, it's been around for a while. But, they're always open for direction. There's a lot of ways to play the game of making a game, right? So in this particular situation, it's like, hey, we have some issues. Let's take some of the fans' advice, like things that they would like to see different now that management's out of the way. All right, so that's what they're going to do. They're going to go after, and they're going to try to make a feature that they really want to make and do something great for their fans. And guess what? Bam! They invent something that fans do like. All right, and that's a pretty cool moment. Anytime you successfully deliver on an item that or a design that you came up from scratch, it's another summit moment. It's one of those standing on top of the world, and also it gains you a lot of credibility with your peers. You become all of a sudden that guru that you first met. Like in this case, when he first met Bonnie, she was kind of that guru. She was the person that knew all the things that he didn't know, and now 4 or 5 years into your career, that's going to be you. So. Can we go over here? All right, got some new artists. So they're asking you for advice. You're finally the guy. Yeah.
I don't know.
Don't I know you somewhere? All right. So we meet again. All right. Wait, did I just see a chicken? All right. So anytime that you work in a big company, especially one that is doing well and is successful, every now and then you're going to run into this situation, right? The day you walk into the building and you can just tell something is different. All right. So, all right, what's going on here? All right. Anytime massive meeting, a lot of people in a room, that's something to raise an eyebrow at. So, uh-oh. And this is kind of inevitable if you're in a big company. Layoffs, mergers, expansions happen. You will certainly lose peers and friends, and that's brutal. We used to call them the abductions because you rarely would even know who was let go until you had a meeting with them later. But it's not always a bad thing. In this particular situation, they're just simply merging with another company. And, sorry, like, out of here. And all they really need is to change over the staff, get some new staff and whatnot. But also with the merger, that also happens with the upper political system in any company. Some people just say, I like the direction the company is going, and sometimes they don't. So a lot of your senior staff will convert over and do different things. You wanted to see me? All right. Talking to Mr. Anderson. All right. And here's the skinny. I'm leaving the company in 2 weeks. Soon all this will be yours. And he's like, what, the curtains? Not the curtains, lad. I want you to be a team development director. And actually, this very similar thing happened to me when I was in the company. A lot of the gurus essentially kind of grew up. They started influencing designs. They started like trying out new approaches. And a lot of the management said, would you guys, some of you guys like to become managers yourselves? I never in a million years would have ever thought I wanted to be a manager or wanted to do anything with management. But when somebody says, now you have the power to kind of steer some of the designs and directions that you want to go, yeah, I'm interested, you know. And when I started that, I had become a director, and I had only been in it for about a year or whatever. My senior boss said I had bigger and better things to do. In 2 weeks, you need to make a pitch to the GM of this company, what you're going to do over the next 2 years at this company. And it was no pressure there, right? So it's an awesome moment of opportunity. Again, it's one of those you can choose to run with the torch or pass it to somebody else. But if you pass it to somebody else, you got to understand that creatively they can take you in a different direction than maybe you want to go. So if this ever happens to you, I suggest you run with the torch. I really do. It's like there's no failure. Even if you just crash and burn, at least you gave it a shot. All right. This is one of the coolest things that happens as you get into the game industry, and guaranteed within the first 7 years you will run into this. All right, here we go. The hell is that device, right? New technology is always amazing, and I was fortunate enough to go through this several times. This is where all of a sudden, you know, there's a new console in the building, and it usually is way ahead of when the public is even aware that it exists, or it's just speculation. There's a lot of security that is involved and whatnot, and as far as you know, giving people the proper clearance to use these tools and to learn about these tools. Again, it's the Wild West. There is no documentation on a lot of this stuff, or very limited documentation. So you have to spend the time with the design teams to learn how things work, and a lot of times things don't work the way you expect. But you are essentially writing the manual on how that next game console is used and developed with. And it's freaking awesome. It is freaking awesome. I remember the first time I saw the Xbox 360, there was a lot of like, you know, nobody's going to believe what this thing does, how powerful it was. We walked into a room and there was a Macintosh G4 sitting on a stand, and that was the console. And I was like, what happened? What happened? You know, but you know, all of a sudden for like audio, that was like that moment where you know, audio went from, hey, you have 2 megs or 4 megs to get all of audio to work in, to you have 32 megs to get all of audio working in, and it was like, whoa, you know, completely different methodology. So anytime they tell you to be on a prototype team or anything like that and deal with this kind of tech, it's really hard, but it's totally worth it. Go for it. All right. moving on here. Eventually, you become, you see, you get a little more security going on. Intellectual property is a big deal at these companies, so you know, things change. Occasionally this happens too. You get there long enough, you start to see people that look like people you used to know and work there. Yeah, awkward moments sometimes. Yeah, right. So here's the thing that's kind of inevitable. Like, you come in and you feel like your designs are innovative and creative and everything, but after so many years, it's your designs that look like kind of the dated ones. And you have to like suck it up and listen to, you know, what people are recommending. And it's a little hard on the ego, but it's a good thing too, because that helps keep you progressing. So in this situation, the new guys are talking about all the things that you loved, or were talking about years before and how they'd like to change them. Oh my gosh. See what I did there? Get it? All right, yeah. And then inevitably, there's going to become that moment where you decide that you yourself want to go off and do that incredible, crazy thing. And you have to find the people beneath you, your peers, to help you out. Not the curtains! I'm naming you my successor. And usually this happens within a 6 to 8 month period where you're trying to mentor somebody else to take your spot. And it's really cool. It's a great learning experience for you as well, because one of the great moments, and you always have to be learning in this career, like there's just no stop, right? So when you're teaching somebody, you get to rehash all the information that you've learned. You get to write all the documentation. Here's how you set up your workstations. Here's how you go through the pipelines. Here's how I dealt with all the assets and all that stuff. And you learn infinitely more about the processes that you got involved with. And sometimes you just gotta, you know, take that big leap of faith and go do something amazing. And it's a pretty surreal moment too. When you walk out of the building that's been your home, in this case 10 years. In my case, it was 13 and a half years. And go do something else here. All right. So, right, there you go. So, totally crazy experience, and I tried to summarize that. I didn't actually know how long that was going to take me to get through all that. Of course, a lot of stuff happens. There's a lot of variables in the game, as there is a lot of variables in your career, as there are in games. But that kind of, tells you some of the things that are possible. Of course, I would like to open up the floor for questions, and also feel free to ask me any questions during this entire conference about anything, regarding games or kind of the nature of working in this environment. This is one of those things that you're all creative people, you're all passionate people. Passionate and creative people really sometimes get weirded out by the business side of being into, making money and making stockholders happy and making your managers and bosses happy and everything like that. But that's the price you're gonna have to pay if you want to, get into some really, really cool projects. And it's worth the time. It really is. Even if it's like kind of an uncomfortable thing to get into, really listen to your peers and your managers and whatnot, because those are the people that are going to foster you into doing some pretty outrageously cool things. So, any questions from the audience? Go ahead.
When building your portfolio, what kind of stuff would you want to see as somebody hired to get developer?
That's a great question. So this is if I'm applying to a company, what can I include in my portfolio that would be impressive, that would intrigue a game company? And I can tell you over and over again, we of course got tons of, demo reels and just, your typical little resume paper, I've done this or whatever. The ones that always went to the top of the stack were the people that did something interactive. They'd send you a flash drive or something. Here's a couple of little executables, or here's some Android games or something that I worked on. People who kind of volunteer for projects. Maybe it's like your classmates and peers here at school working on a project. When you see the guy that's like, I graduated, versus the guy that's like, I graduated and worked on 15 little independent games and Twine stories and other weird things like that. It's like, this person not only studies it, but they live it. That's what they want to do, and they're passionate about it. And it, whatever discipline it is, maybe you're an artist or whatever, if you submit us this portfolio and it's just like not only stuff for games, but just a lot of the other types of drawings and worlds and stuff that you've created just out of interest, you can tell the people that are interested in making money and the people that are interested because they will die if they don't get into making things and being creative. And be that person, because those are always the people that we'll look at first, always. Sure, anybody else?
So one of the things that you demonstrated really well in there is how in most game studios, there are these specialized skills and processes that you learn by doing that other folks within the studio don't really know.
Yes.
And and it's hard to get that knowledge transferred across. And it's true in small studios and big studios. Somebody knows something, other people need that knowledge, don't necessarily have it. What are some of the tools or processes or just ways of communication you saw to overcome that?
Sure. So when our studio was tiny, we used to do these things called the post-mortem, which is after you're done with a project, you would literally compile your notes and say, here's what's right and wrong. And also, here's all the processes we used to make this thing, feature, game, whatever. And then it would be the job of usually the lead of each discipline to post this information somewhere. Originally, this would start just as a post-mortem directory, and you'd put in all the notes. And that way, when people came aboard for the next year's project, please read through the post-mortem notes, and then they can kind of have an idea of how things were laid out, where things were. When I originally started, we used to actually make a 3-ring binder, and it was all done with paper. So you'd have these books that you could kind of tell from year to year, and it would have everything from here's the memory layouts, here's how we set up each banks to be swapped in for different levels. I mean, they were pretty technical, and then they just kind of had the general things at the end of here's what we really should have done, or some of the things that we didn't expect to run into problems or whatnot. Later years, this evolved into kind of like a wiki page, like an internal wiki page for the company that, again, you could keep all those notes there, and then it was easy to pass that link off to new employees. So even if you are in a small indie company and let's say there's only 3 of you or whatever, do that. Create some kind of internal wiki page or documents or stuff like that, and let people write in. I just stumbled on a weird problem, and here's how I worked through it. Because a problem, especially if you're in a bigger group where there's multiple studios, you're reinventing the wheel a lot, not by, this choice, it just happens. And if all of a sudden you're notice, hey, did you know this studio ran into that exact same problem? And the way they approached it is this. And, that is not only good for internally for studios, it's good in general for just the industry itself. And unfortunately, the industry is so ridiculously competitive, and everybody's like, if I let any secret out, it's going to be our downfall. I totally disagree with that. That's why I'm here. I would rather explain why these are good things to share, because literally if studios really did start saying here's the problems we're discovering with these various consoles or game engines or whatever, and there's this massive database of information, how good would games be within a couple of years, right? So definitely share what you know. It's worth it for everybody involved. Anybody else? You learn. Go ahead.
Things, we have a lot of students, alumni, and this technology is a problem in the industry in general. Getting
Mhm.
What do you think that could be done, what is serious for them to be attracted to do internships?
Sure, I know that that's there's quite a bit to the question was how do people get internships essentially with game companies, especially big game companies. This is something that game companies themselves have to really kind of explore. What does that really mean, right? So Electronic Arts actually has an entire department called University Relations that they actively go out, recruit, and try to find interns, and they bring them in for various disciplines. Occasionally, there'll be the disciplines that don't have any kind of direction as to what they would want an intern to do. So occasionally, like you might even, as educators, write companies and just say, hey, I don't know if you've considered an internship, but here's some ideas of what an intern could do for your company or what we would like them to learn from your company. A lot of that is assumed that they know, and they don't. They just a lot of times are like, it would be cool to have an intern, but one of the issues that I actually worked very closely with the university relationship group at Tiburon, and we would literally have to define out what it is that we want people to do, because the last thing is, there's always the joke is the intern's going to be the guy that goes gets the coffee and everything. That just sucks, right? And so especially in audio, it's like, yeah, I could have you be the guys that cut 100,000 lines of speech, but you would hate the industry and like immediately, and you're like, this isn't what I dreamed it would be or whatever. So we would try to structure a program that says you're going to spend 2 months learning sound integration and sound creation, then go into speech, and then maybe some speech integration, maybe some QA stuff, to kind of give you a broader taste of the different things that you would learn or experience if you were actually starting up in the industry. And that's a really good thing, because a lot of those people, once they understood all those principles, became contractors or employees, and they were properly trained. And it's good for us because all of a sudden it's like, it forces us to document the processes and set up a schedule and a curriculum that you would need to have for a person starting off anyway. Just in this story, it's pretty much like, welcome to the studio, into the deep end you go. That is really the story. That is really what most people face when they get into the game industry. And I think it also heavily contributes to the attrition that happens, 3 or 4 years in. Some people just are like, I don't feel like I have a solid grasp of what it is I'm doing. And people, they want to have that sense of security and that feeling of control when they get into their job. You want to feel good at your job. Go ahead.
How difficult would you say it is to get into the game straight out?
Well, and kind of hand in hand with his question, the question of being how hard is it to get out of college and get right into the industry? Again, I think it's about how are you going to market yourself? And essentially in the article that I put up on the CIMFest Facebook, I explained kind of how I put together myself as a brand in a time there was no social media or anything like that. But again, what I had done was create a portfolio of things that were relating directly to what I was going after. So then all of a sudden they were saying, this isn't somebody that just has a college education. This is somebody who's ridiculously passionate about this. And, they've done several, even a couple indie games or maybe some just designs that are interactive or whatever, but something out of the norm. The sheet of paper that says this is what I kind of qualified to do or whatever means very little in the creative industry of the game companies. You need something tactile. You need a website or something that's interactive and kind of expresses your specific interest. I also recommend that you go after what it is your specialty. Don't come off as a generalist at first. That's something, in later years, really, if you have a broad scope of things, then that's really cool. But when you're starting out, you're saying, look, my focus right now is I want to be an audio person, or I want to be an artist, or I want to be, whatever it is that you're passionate about. Go ahead. Yes, yeah. I'm like notorious of that. I'm like anything. I'm like, ooh, shiny object. That's me. And that's okay. And sometimes that works. And it's interesting when I work with resume companies and whatnot. Then they're saying you really should try to avoid being too many things. you should rein it into like, maybe the top 3 or 4, But it also helps when they're qualifying candidates. Like, hey, this person is a great artist. Did you also know that she is interested in physics programming or something? And then they're like, that's a 2-for-1 right there, And no, it does help. And also it's great when you get into your career, you kind of have the ability to go in either direction. There was certainly people that I had met in the industry that started in arts, wound up in animation, or just anything, or even management or whatever. So don't be afraid to be agile, essentially. Yeah. Go ahead.
You bring up some great points about the attrition in the industry, and just being thrown into the deep end, even more true of small studios and big studios. There's not as much process in place. What are some of the attributes you've seen in new folks coming in, whether interns, new employees, or new companies, that either made them succeed and able to thrive in that environment, and others who figured it was better to go elsewhere, management figured it was better for them to go elsewhere pretty quickly?
Sure. This is the question is essentially sink or swim. What are the qualities of a person that we feel is able to adapt or whatever to the demands of a new job, especially in the creative industry. Really, when I list out all the skills that I know or have done or whatever thing, really it comes down to 2. Are you able to adapt? Are you able to learn? Those are the 2 most important skills that you can possibly have in this industry. Because even if you think you're going to go in and do a very specific thing, technology advances, just like I showed you there. The next wave of whatever comes out might be, all that in a bag of chips. Like, it's something you haven't even qualified to study. It's like, who would have thought that would exist? Who would have thought like half the stuff exists now? So if you're open to learning new things and listening to people and experimenting a lot, that's great. And your ability to adapt, totally. But I've seen people who have like Hollywood grade resumes come in and just totally lock up, getting into the game industry because they just, they can't adapt, or they just don't care to learn new things. Really being open-minded, and also you kind of have to get rid of the ego. Everybody's got a little bit of an ego to a point, but you kind of have to set it aside and say, like, I'm never going to be the master at this, right? I'm just going to, have the kind of Slumdog Millionaire approach where it's like I've had so many different experiences that it becomes a collective, right? And you're able to kind of move forward just based on your ability to learn and adapt to different scenarios as they come at you. Those are the people that are like the long-termers, and the people that I've met who've been there, 14, 20 something odd years. That's how they did it. They're nothing like the person that they were when they walked in, other than the ability of just being like, come at me, bro. Like, show me what great things come, and be willing to adapt to new technologies and methodologies. And that's the other one little tiny thing extra on that. If you go in knowing specific programs or game engines or whatever, don't cling to that too tightly, because things change a lot. And be willing to, just say, okay, this was really cool for this era. I'm ready to learn some different tools. Go ahead. Sure.
When you are writing a resume and portfolio, would it be helpful to say you have worked with these specific engines, like I worked on people?
Yes.
And I worked with them?
Yeah, the question is it helpful to list out the tools that you're used to using and whatnot in your resume? And absolutely, yeah. If they say, oh, this person has Unity experience, or this person, or whatever tool or methodology you've used, if you can put those in a separate part of your resume, here's my skills or my technical abilities or software that I'm used to using, it helps us kind of qualify to what level you've actually started peering into. In the back there?
I know you touched on this earlier, but are the particulars of what you want to do within a game studio, or for that, even if you're interested in design, you have to know how to be specific on hair, or be specific on skin or buildings and stuff like that. But even within smaller companies, does this divide even exist within like programming? Like, I only program this, I only program this, and then when we go into the game company, should we be particular? Like, is particular better, or is it broader better starting off?
Sure. So the question is regarding skill set and within your discipline. Is it better to be more focused or broader? You need both kinds of people to really be successful in a company. The broader people usually don't have the depth of information the really focused people do. So you always want to combine those two people together, you know, the generalist and the specialist. It really depends to what degree you're in. Like if you're like exceptionally good at programming, they're going to look to you as the expert in programming. And they're probably not going to pull you away from that much because that's going to be, you know, the thing you're going to be best known as. If you're still adapting to that, they might try to, you know, throw some other stuff on your plate to see if you're really good. Like there was a guy I worked with for years, did a lot of audio stuff, built an entire runtime engine. And they also discovered that by chance he's an amazing lighter too. So that was, you know, very beneficial for those departments as well. And of course your irreplaceability, your value at that company becomes greater if all of a sudden they find out that you're a specialist in multiple systems. Right here.
Yeah, when you were saying don't get tied to certain engines when you're creating a portfolio or whatever, would you rather see as hiring someone that can do, you know, Unity, Unreal Engine, and then like a custom built engine around the game, or would you rather see a better game built with a specific engine?
So this is kind of talking again about either skills with a specific tool set or skills with a broader tool set as far as when you're starting out. I think you'll be considered on either, depending, like if you did, like I'm just a Unity guy and I made this really cool Unity game, we're like, awesome. The questions that are going to start getting thrown out at you is, are you completely focused on how the tool lets you do this? Or do you just understand the methodology of how to do that? If you answer, I understand the methodology of how to do it, then all of a sudden we have less fear that you're going to be able to adapt to other systems or proprietary systems. So if I hand you Frostbite all of a sudden and say, all right, make a game in that, it's not like, this has nothing that Unity had in it and I'm going to totally freeze up. Or if you're going to go, yeah, you know, this actually kind of does the same thing and, you know, I can adapt to that. It's just a different way of talking about it, you know. So again, as you learn a tool, if you know, all you can use is Unity or whatever tool that you want to learn with, take the time to not only learn what the tool does or how it's, you know, expressing the ability for you to do whatever interaction it is, but what's the methodology behind it? Like, how does it kind of rationalize doing that, or how does it make it work that way? And try to take general notes about that. Like, the system kind of works by evaluating a parameter and blah, blah, blah. And the more of that kind of recipe book that you have, the more bulletproof you are for future technologies to come down the line.
I do want to say one thing about putting skills in your resume. Never overclaim. Because you've seen Unity doesn't mean you're necessarily good with it, and it'll be found out very quickly if you claim something that's not true or not accurate. But talking about being found out, you touched on QA, quality assurance, bug hunting, as part of this. So even in a big studio, everybody has to do a little bit of QA, even though you have dedicated testers within. What are some of the skills you've seen that have made someone a good tester within the companies you've dealt with? And that's often a good first way into the industry for people.
Sure. So the question is, what are the skill sets of a great QA person? This actually kind of relates back to the methodology thing. The QA guy that says this and this are wrong, okay, that's valuable, thanks. Could you provide us more detail? The people that can not only just say, well, I went from, you know, this part of the level and I did these 5 steps and this broke this way, that's helpful. But the guy that says, I think what's going on is it's, you know, maybe it's like an audio bug or whatever, it's loading the same bank of 5 samples in over and over and over again, and it's becoming overly redundant. Or it said something way too specific and it didn't have the conditions available to do so. And all of a sudden it's like, well, that's a very specific, you know, little area to go look into. Again, if like the QA people get in and have that curiosity to say, you know, that bug that I submitted about, you know, whatever, the ability to walk through walls or something like that, what typically causes that? You know, and they just flat out ask a designer, you might get some insight that you had no idea about. And then the more you see it, you're like, that relates to that. And again, it's that kind of being able to say, hey, you know, there's something with the collision system that's causing these 5 things to happen or whatever. And it might be related to this feature that just went in. I was reading the notes on the design. It looks like you guys are experimenting with, you know, different textures or, you know, whatever. That might be related to that. It gives us more specific information. The people that I've seen not only get hired from QA as full-time or rise to, a lot of them have even become like producers or senior producers, came from QA were those guys. The guys that cracked the methodology bug, essentially. Anybody else? All right. Well, I am here all day. I'm an open book, and not just here. Like, if you want to hit me up on LinkedIn as you go through your career, or whatever that you know you're facing professionally, I want you to succeed. And if I can say anything to help you succeed and create great things, you are all my peers. I'm an open book. Thank you very much.
A couple of announcements. From what I heard, we have a few people that were late. We will be taking payments in just a minute. I wanted to recognize a few people one person from GGDA, Paul Bartlett over there. He came all the way from the Atlanta chapter to come hang out with us. Quick poll. Raise your hand if you're a Columbus State alumni. Take a look at that. It's pretty cool. So, as I said, if you have the app, next talk's not till like 11:15. So you guys got, what, an hour to just hang out with Jesse and everybody? So, let's go network. Let's get to know some of these people in the industry. If you have not registered, or if you're pre-registered, just got to pay. Registration table's right out there. We'll get that open up again. Again, Jesse, awesome job opening us up. Give him a round of applause. And enjoy the rest of CIMFest.